Now once more, give rise to the motivation of bodhicitta and listen with that motivation. So we paused before the break in the midst of the explanation of the qualifications of disciples. So continuing, in the first place, teacher and disciple accept each other without each examining the other. Then, although the disciples, for the novelty of it, may show respect and so on to the teacher, they get angry over circumstantial trifles. So we're on the bottom of page 26. Even if they stay alone, they find fault in the slightest thing, discourage all the teacher's close disciples. Some disciples may praise their teachers in their presence and make a false show of devotion, but in their minds there is neither faith nor respect, and they are secretly using their artful ways to play them false. Because of all this, and because they criticize their teachers, the negative consequences are boundless. So, prior to this paragraph, we have already covered quite more than half of this section about bad disciples. Beginning with a quotation from this Self-Arisen Awareness Tantra, they show no honor or respect and so on. One of these quotations I'd memorized in the past because it's so pertinent and precious, and so coming across it today again, it's refreshed my memory. So what the text is saying here, that in the first place, teacher and disciple fail to examine one another. They launch into a relationship without examining the other. So as I said before, not examining the teacher is like drinking poison. Not examining the student is like jumping off a cliff. And then for the novelty of it, for the superficial novelty of it, disciples might show respect and so on to their teacher, make a real kind of display of being respectful, making prostrations, bowing down, offering them gifts. They do this at the outset. But then a small circumstance, a small condition, a small trigger angers them, and then it all falls apart. So these days a lot of people ask their teachers or ask lamas for letters of approval or this and that, letters of introduction or letters of what we say, like approval. And I never agree to give those sorts of letters. So it could be something like that. You don't get your wish fulfilled, your request is not fulfilled, your request is refused, or maybe you're scolded or criticized by the teacher. And then the student gets angry with the teacher, they cry insults, they become rude. So some people think, well, breaking one's samaya with the teacher is to actually hurt them or abuse them or steal from them or something. It doesn't have to be as grave, as coarse as that. To get angry, to think badly, to feel critical, to speak critically of the teacher, that is a transgression of samaya with the guru. So to think about the teacher, this teacher, he's so interested in wealth, he's so attached to his wife or to women, he has this and that fault and shortcoming. To have that kind of mindset is a transgression of samaya. So for myself, I had the great good fortune of not seeing any faults in my teachers, Kimodazu Rinpoche and Kimochuki Rinpoche. They literally did not have faults. They were completely free of faults, no attachment to material gain, to status, no attachment whatsoever. So because they had such faultless teachers, then there was no way to see faults in them. Now, of course, if one has pure perception, then you can project faults onto a teacher even when there is no faults. So these sorts of bad disciples with critical minds, they may praise their teachers in their presence, even if they stay alone, they find fault in the slightest thing and discourage the teacher's other disciples. So you find some people like this who not only criticize the teacher but also criticize their disciples and their retinue. So that kind of criticism, a critical mindset to even the teacher's retinue and other students is actually a seed, a cause for eventual transgression of samaya. So we need to be careful about these things. Some disciples may praise their teachers in their presence, to their face, and make a false show of devotion. They make a show. They act as if they have devotion. It's a contrived, artificial display. They join their hands together and act in a certain way, show a certain expression on their face. They fabricate their behavior. But in their minds, there's neither faith nor respect. And secretly, they're using their artful ways to play the teacher false. They are using the teacher, playing them false. There's two aspects to playing them false: to deceive and to act crafty. They're very similar but slightly different. So one is a kind of a pretense. One aspect of playing false is to be pretentious, to pretend you are free of faults even though you have faults, and the other is to actively deceive. Because they criticize their teachers, the negative consequences are boundless. Teachers, the spiritual teachers, Vajra masters, are powerful objects, what we call powerful objects. This means that if we serve them well, if we relate in a positive way to them, then the positive consequences are boundless. But likewise, the negative consequences of treating them badly or being critical of them are also boundless. That's how it goes with powerful objects. Who will endure the terrifying hells, the 18 terrifying hells, such as the hell of ultimate torment and so on? So such bad disciples will end up in the hell realms, enduring the terrifying sufferings of those hell realms. Those who speak ill of the Master, it is there they will remain. But we need to clarify here. Otherwise you might think it's taught, we find statements like this: those who criticize the teacher will go to Vajra hell. But when this statement refers to a specific type of teacher, a teacher with whom you have a connection, right? One's own teacher. And a teacher that you have formed a profound connection with by receiving empowerment, transmissions, and instructions. That kind of teacher with whom you have a profound spiritual connection, if you criticize them, then the consequences are boundless, and that can lead, that transgression of samaya can lead to the hell realm. So we're not just talking about criticizing, say, a teacher you have no connection with. It's also not the case and once we have formed a connection with a teacher by receiving teachings and transmissions from them, you cannot annul that connection. You can't say, well, I've received teachings from them, they were my teacher before, but now I'm going to go and follow some other teacher and they're not my teachers anymore. That's not how it works. Once you formed a connection with a teacher-student relationship, that relationship always remains. You can't annul it. So you need to honor that relationship. Otherwise, just like Dalpo Rinpoche, Lord Gampopa said, if we practice the Dharma in discord with the Dharma, Dharma itself becomes a cause for rebirth in the lower realms. And like he says, bless me that my mind may turn to the Dharma, Dharma to the path, path may dispel confusion, and confusion may arise as wisdom. So it's really important. These points are extremely important. We need to take them to heart. Once you have received teachings from a teacher, formed a teacher-student relationship, that relationship must be honored. Otherwise, you will be damaging yourself. For instance, think of there are thousands of people, many of you here, went to receive the Ngondro transmissions from Sangye Nyingma Rinpoche. That is something really worth rejoicing in. But now that you have this teacher-disciple relationship with that master, you need to honor that and refrain from ever criticizing or being critical of that teacher. This is so important. We all need to be aware of these points, whether we be a serious practitioner, a renunciant, or a lay practitioner. And if you are a lama, a monastic, a kempo, and so on, then it's best to actually be very careful from the outset about the connections you make with teachers. It's best actually not to form too many teacher-student relationships, and to focus instead on just putting into practice the teachings you've received, rather than going and, finding more teachers and receiving more teachings. So cultivate faith and pure perception. Faith and pure perception to all of the teachers, all of the bodhisattvas. That is the best. Since teacher and disciples break the commitments equally, the brave must first check the connection between master and disciple. Now we're on page 27. If the teacher and disciples' commitments are damaged, so you might wonder, well, how does the samaya, the commitment between the teacher and disciple, get damaged? In one of the tantras, it explains. So some people might think, well, if oneself as a student remains free of fault, then even if the teacher gets angry or is displeased, well, one is free of fault, so that the samaya isn't damaged. One might think like that, and that kind of is quite a compelling train of thought. But actually that's not how it works when you look at the teachings in the tantras. One needs to be free of fault from one's own side, but also refrain from disturbing the teacher's mind, refrain from displeasing the teacher. It's not enough just to be free of fault from one's own side. So there needs to be this mutual affection and regard from both the teacher and student side. The teacher needs to have this affection that embraces the student. This is my student. They need to have the mindset of, this is my student, and that perception. If they forsake the student and think this student has broken the samaya, I will not take them as a student, then it's finished, the connection is broken. And likewise, the student from their side needs to have a constant affection for the teacher, regarding them as their teacher, and with affection and love and respect, just like a child for their parents. So this is explained in the tantric scriptures, actually. So for the samaya to remain pure and to be upheld, there needs to be this mutual regard and perception from both the teacher side and the student side. It's not enough just to, it's not a purely subjective thing from the student side. So one needs to avoid displeasing the teacher, One needs to foster the affection of the teacher and avoid displeasing them in any way. This is a very important aspect of maintaining samaya. It's very important to understand this point and these points about samaya and the student-master relationship. One does hear things these days from other teachers or people who have done quite a lot of study. Things that are, one hears some misrepresentations of the teachings on samaya. Things that say, you might hear people saying, well, you just need to look after your own mindset. It doesn't matter whether the teacher is annoyed with you or not. As long as you're kind of clean from your side, your samaya is maintained. Or samaya is something that needs to be maintained by the teacher and student both. So earlier on today, Rinpoche spoke about that, right? Those are slight misunderstandings about samaya. So in the past, I wasn't able to receive the transmission for all the 13 major treatises from Kimodazu Rinpoche, one of my gurus. I received most, but not all from him, and I very much needed and wanted the transmission for all 13 major treatises. It's important for me also as a teacher, passing on the teachings to my own students and monks. So one of my Dharma friends I ended up requesting the remaining transmissions from one of my Dharma friends. And then one day afterwards he laughingly said to me, well, now Rinpoche, now I'm your Lama, haha. And I answered back, well, there's lots of different types of lamas, aren't there? Like in one of Longchenpa's texts, he enumerates several dozen different types of lamas from whom you receive empowerment, transmission, vows, and so on. And I said, well, you might be my lama, but you're just a lama from whom I've received a transmission. That was a kind of joke, but not entirely a joke. We need to know that there are different types of teachers, and they each hold slightly different weight and gravity. So the connection with, for instance, the gravity of a teacher-student relation, the gravity of one's relationship with the teacher from whom one has received, say, just a transmission, an oral transmission, that has a certain weight, but more than that, the gravity of the relationship with the teacher from whom you've received empowerment and transmission and pith instructions, that is far, far greater, right? So there are degrees of gravity and preciousness, we could say, when it comes to the teacher-student relationship. So in the past, the first Dujum Limpa, a group of students, about 20 students. Yeah. So in the past, the Dujum Lingpa, the first Dujum, about a group of 20 or so students came to meet him. He was already quite renowned at this time with a large group of students. A group of 20 students came to receive teachings, and Dujum Lingpa said to them, well, you will already have received teachings from other teachers, but if you want to receive teachings from me, then you need to abandon all of your previous teachers. You have to forsake them, let them go, no longer regard them as your teachers. So think about this overnight, come back in the morning with your decision. No, the students were quite shocked. They went away and thought about it, and when they regathered in the morning, most of them, all of them except one, said, okay, we're willing to abandon our teachers. They thought this is a difficult decision, but there's no one like Dujum Lingpa, he's Guru Rinpoche in the flesh. So we can't forsake this opportunity to receive teachings from him. But then there was one student who said, I'm sorry, Rinpoche, I cannot bear to forsake my previous teachers, so I will take leave and I will take leave and not be receiving teachings from you. So this student said, I cannot forsake the kindness of my precious teachers, so I will take leave and not receive teachings from you. And when Dusha Lingpa heard this from all the students, he said, right, you, the one student, he said, you're the one who has karma and good fortune. You're the only one from amongst this group that I'm willing to teach. And he sent all the other 19 or so who were willing to forsake their teachers. He said, all of you, get out. And later on, those students, those 19 or so students, they made confessions for their mistakes, purified their mistake, and then I think they were able to receive teachings from him. But that just shows one cannot abandon one's previous teachers, forsake one's previous teachers. It is not possible, that is not acceptable. So in the end, Dusha Lingpa embraced all of those students and they all turned out well. So that's an anecdote from Dusha Lingpa's life that shows just the importance of honoring our connection with our teachers and never ever forsaking that connection. So I mentioned this story in connection with these lines of quotation, the 2 lines of this quote. The brave must first check the connection between master and disciple. They should check each other, student and teacher should check each other over a long period, examine for up to 12 years. So this is taught in some of the tantras and scriptures. 12 years. So 12 years, I didn't examine my teachers for 12 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. At the least, one should examine the teacher for 2 or 3 months, right? At the very least. And failing that, at least for 5 or 6 days, some examination needs to take place. It is indispensable. These days, in the 21st century, people just do everything very fast. The age of technology and all of that, everything is done speedily. But we need to take pause and reflect and make sure we give ourselves the time to examine the teacher before forming a connection, right? Such examination must be carried out before any connection is made through empowerment or teaching. But once one has received empowerment or teaching, even if one's teachers have broken their vows, it is improper to examine them or lose faith or do anything but regard them as objects of devotion and respect. So here we come to a vital point. The examination of teachers must take place before receiving teachings. Once you have received teachings and formed the connection, then examination cannot continue. You cannot keep scrutinizing the teacher. The time for examination has come to a close. Now that you have formed the connection, you need to honor that connection by regarding the teacher with faith and respect. So even if one's teacher has broken their vows by committing all 4 radical defeats, referring to the root downfalls of the monastic vows, which destroys the monastic vows, or for instance, the vow of breaking one's celibacy, telling an unsurpassable lie, and so on. Even if they break these vows and do something like that, it's still improper to scrutinize them or to lose faith. So once you've formed a connection with a teacher and they've become one's root guru, even if they slaughter 100 horses, 100 animals, what have you, no matter what they do, you must not lose your faith. You must not look critically upon them. So up in Humla, the local people there have such deep-rooted faith. They have such deep-rooted faith in their teachers, namely my late father, Degi Rinpoche, as well as my late brother, Shiva Rinpoche. my late father sometimes did extraordinary things, gave really harsh scoldings to students, even beat students, sometimes broke their stuff, their property, things that would usually trigger people to become angry and so on. But these sorts of things just serve to increase the faith of his students up in Humla. They have such deep-rooted, sound faith. So it's not to say that so I think Rinpoche is saying, of course, generally a teacher should be careful with their behavior because you don't want to do something that discourages students or shakes their faith. But anyway, in the case of the Humla people, maybe it's also they have this naturally very deep-rooted faith. Maybe it's also because they're not that exposed to other things, not that educated or something, I don't know. But anyway, they have this quality of deep-rooted faith. If you don't consider as your teachers those from whom you've heard a single voice, it's as a dog you'll be reborn 100 times, and as an outcast you'll take birth. As a dog you'll be reborn. There are also stories of being reborn as a scorpion or some kind of vile insect. As an outcast. So, as an outcast, this term outcast, the Tibetan that's translated here as outcast, can also mean a scorpion, that kind of insect, I think Rinpoche is saying. It can also mean an outcast, someone who is cast, who is shunned by society. This is the consequence, the karmic consequence of disparaging, dishonoring a teacher from whom one has received just 4 lines of teaching in the sutra context. Likewise, the Dharma is so powerful. She was telling a story about, from Buddha's time, about a student who received just 4 lines of teachings, and by honoring those 4 lines, 1 verse of teaching, took rebirth as a Brahmin who then became the disciple of Shariputra and attained the state of Arhat, and was given the name Arhat cow. Strange name, but anyway, that shows the power of the Dharma. Even just 4 lines of teaching, if they're honored and taken to heart, can bring us that much benefit. But equally, if we dishonor and disrespect just 4 lines of teachings and the teacher from whom we've received them, then the negative consequences are equally grave, right? So one shouldn't think that these sorts of points about respecting a teacher, honoring a teacher, are taught for the teacher's sake, from out of selfish aims or personal aims. Rather, these teachings are given as instructions on how to uphold the Dharma, how to uphold and maintain the Dharma purely. So these are genuine instructions on how to regard the teacher as a student and so on. There's no personal selfish aims at work here. So now, how to follow one's master. Having found a master with the right qualifications, how should we follow him or her? The Buddha taught that in order to be cured of the malady of afflictive emotions, we should rely on our teachers like patients relying on a doctor. If you are sick and you want to get better, then you need to follow the advice of your doctor. You need to put your trust in their hands and do what they say. There's no use, there is no personal benefit to be gained from just being really stubborn and hard-headed and saying things like one Dharma friend, Lama Gyaltsen, who would say, kind of boast about how he wasn't scared of his doctor's threats and was not listening to what his doctor said. He wasn't taking medicine and wasn't following his doctor's advice, and he would say that almost like a boast, But what is there to boast about? All he's doing is making himself suffer, right? All we're doing is making ourselves suffer if we don't follow the doctor's advice. So the same goes with the Dharma. If we want to cure ourselves from the suffering of the afflictions, we need to follow the Buddha's advice, put the teachings into practice. Likewise, to gain protection from the fear of difficulties, we should rely on them like common people relying on a king. So in ancient times, like an ordinary citizen relying on a king for protection. So for instance, if we avoid doing illegal things like stealing, assaulting others, harming others, then we're actually benefiting ourselves, right? Because we're going to avoid being arrested, being punished, and so on. So to guard our own behavior is actually in our own benefit. Likewise, to escape from the narrow defile of birth and death. We talk about the 4 streams or rivers of suffering: birth, old age, sickness, and death. There is really no greater suffering than that of birth and death. To escape from the suffering of birth, death, as well as aging and sickness, we should rely on them, meaning rely on qualified teachers, like travelers relying on a guide. Just as the famous dedication prayer says, by this merit may all attain omniscience and so on, and gain freedom from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. So to that end, we should rely on teachers. So these are all examples to illustrate the way in which we as students should follow our teachers. So if we're traveling along a path, we would rely on an escort and a guide to show us the way and also to protect us from bandits, thieves, and so on. To accomplish our own and others' welfare, we should rely on them like merchants relying on a ship's captain. These days people study business, right? I think she's referring about like a business, masters of business studies or business management. Bachelor of Business Studies, something like that. So some of the Westerners are laughing at me, maybe laughing at my lousy English. Anyway, the point is there is some degree or study you do to learn how to do business, right? So that's how it goes these days. You study to educate yourself first in business before engaging in business yourself. And then we have a more traditional example here. We should rely on them like merchants relying on a ship's captain. To cross over the river of cyclic existence, we should rely on them like passengers in a boat relying on a helmsman. So the passengers in a boat rely on the captain of the ship to steer the ship and take them where they want to go. As Buddha says in the sutras, fortunate child, think of yourself as a sick person, think of the teaching as medicine, think of your assiduous practice as the treatment, think of the spiritual friend as a skilled physician. You might think, when you read this and other such statements, think of yourself as a sick person. You might think, well, I'm not sick, there's nothing wrong with me. Okay, you might not be physically sick right now, but you are sick, we are all sick with the afflictions of attachment, aggression, and ignorance. This is the sickness of chronic illness of sentient beings. In the past, until recent times, when talking about illness in the West, in Western countries, illness only referred to physical illnesses. But these days there's this new category of illness, mental illness. This is actually a new term in the English language, mental illness. So now mental imbalances and disturbances, feelings of unease, depression, and so on, these are all regarded as illnesses. So these mental illnesses, the root of all of these mental illnesses are the three poisons of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So, in this way, think of yourself as a sick person, as someone afflicted by mental illness and the afflictions that are the root of that. Think of the teaching as medicine. So if you're sick, then you need to take medicine to recover, right? Like me, I take about a handful of medicine every day. So you need to think of the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, as medicine. If you go to see a doctor and they give you medicine, but you don't take the medicine, well then you're just wasting your time, right? Seeing the doctor isn't going to help you if you don't take their medicine. So therefore, think of your assiduous practice as the treatment. And then you can receive some benefit. So recently I went for my health checkup. The doctor told me my sugar levels, because I'm diabetic, my sugar levels were pretty much at normal level. So this is because I'd been so diligent in following the doctor's advice, taking my medicine and following his advice. So he said, you're doing well, your sugar levels have dropped to normal, but you need to maintain your routine and you need to keep on following my advice. Otherwise, your sugar levels will rise again. So this is how it goes with sugar levels, right? It's also if we're very physically busy and physically active, if the body gets physically stressed, that actually causes the sugar levels to rise. So, yeah. But just like dealing with physical illnesses, likewise with when following the Dharma and dealing with our mental affliction, we need to regard the teaching as medicine. We need to apply the teachings just like taking our medicine and think of the spiritual friend as a skilled physician. So if we follow a genuine spiritual friend, a qualified teacher, receive the teachings from them and then put them into practice, we can free ourselves from the illness of birth, old age, sickness and death. The Buddhist teachings are so rich and so deep, so vast. The Buddhist teachings are not something simple and easy. We could just take one verse, like the famous verse, "May the precious mind of enlightenment arise where it has not arisen," and so on. If you really explain that verse in detail, there is just an endless amount of things to say. You have to explain the whole of the Prajnaparamita, all of the main genres of Buddhist teaching. The Buddha Dharma is just so contains fathomless depths and so many layers. Even a single short statement is just so rich in meaning. So reading through the sutra quotation on page 29. Now at the top of page 30. Fortunate child, think of yourself as a passenger on a ferry and so on. Think of the spiritual friend as a skilled helmsman. Fortunate child, think of yourself in relation to the spiritual friend as being like the earth, which never wearies under all the loads it bears, like a diamond. So, the example of the earth always holds upright no matter how much load it has to bear. Think of yourself like a diamond which no adverse factor can alter, like a disciple who never ignores the advice he's given, like a servant who obeys everything he is told, like a bull with broken horns who has lost any sense of self-importance. There's a very beautiful story actually in connection with this. So probably the scholars here will be very familiar with this story. But in the past there's a story of, a lion and a cow, I think. So the lion had a cub, but the cub got lost. Sorry, a calf got lost, but then it was taken in by a lioness, who instead of eating the calf, took it in and treated it like her own child, fed it, nursed it with her own milk, and this cow, or this buffalo, grew up to be so strong because it had been nursed on lion milk, and it was of course a cow, but sorry, it was a bull. But a bull that had been raised with lions and was accepted by its lion siblings and so on. So he grew into a really strong bull. Had all the strength, normal strength of a bull, and even more so because he'd been raised on lioness's milk. It's very nutritious milk, and he was more dexterous and capable because of being raised with lions. He could dig holes and leap very far and climb. But then a wolf came along, and this wolf was very crafty. So it seems the wolf wanted to prey on the bull. So the wolf, being very crafty and crafty and full of guile, laid a plan to incite discord between the bull and his lion family. So the wolf approached the bull one day and said, "You know what? You need to be careful because your lion siblings, they don't really love you, they don't really care for you. They're just looking after you and raising you so that they can eat you one day. That's their aim. That's their plot, really." Then the wolf went along to the lions and said, "That bull, you need to be careful of him. You're looking after him with so much love, but actually he's planning to attack you and do you harm." So he sowed discord between the lions and the bull, and they ended up turning against one another and attacking one another. They got into this big fight, and then during the fight, the bull's horns broke. To begin with, this bull was so, you could say, sort of proud and dignified. He was strong, and mighty and had these glorious horns. But during the fight, his horns were broken off, and then he became extremely humble. So this is a story to explain this last phrase, a bull with broken horns. So then he became very meager and timid, this bull with broken horns. So it's an example to illustrate being free of pride. And to backtrack, so the wolf sowed discord between this family of lions and the bull, right? To sow discord in families or groups of friends is incredibly negative, incredibly harmful. It causes so much upset and disturbance, most especially to sow discord in the Sangha between students, Dharma siblings, or between teacher and students. It's incredibly negative karma. This can cause samayas to be broken and connections to be damaged. In Lord Atisha's instructions, we find this pith instruction. Well, it's rooted in Buddha's words, of course, but the sevenfold cause and effect instruction on giving rise to bodhicitta. And the first meditation is to acknowledge the kindness of all mother sentient beings, because it's mothers that have the superior compassion and loving kindness. So in the context of the Bodhisattva teachings, mothers, females, are actually really praised because of their praised and lauded as superior because of their superior loving kindness and compassion. That said, often in a mundane context, women can gossip more than men. Of course, men also gossip and talk and banter and say a lot of meaningless stuff. But often it's the case that women gossip more. And gossip, the point is that gossip can lead to conflict, can lead to discord, it can lead to misunderstanding. You know, you say one thing, you're just gossiping away, talking about meaningless stuff, and you end up saying something that is misunderstood. And someone flies into a rage, and then a lot of upset is caused. Anyway, today I've criticized the women here a little bit, but no need to worry. In the coming days, no doubt I will be praising the women, and praising the women more than the men. Often I do that. Praise the women, praise females for their qualities more than the males. One time, one of our Dharma friends, he's passed away now, but he said to me once, Rinpoche, you're always praising the women. If you don't praise the men, sometimes, we're going to get a bit discouraged, or people are going to complain or something like that, because you're always praising the women and not the men. Anyway. So, of the many ways that have been taught for following a teacher, here we'll consider 8 headings: making offerings and so on. So we're in the middle of page 30. So 8 ways making offerings, headed regarding the teacher as a Buddha and so on, which we'll go through one by one in a moment. In the past, I think Rinpoche said he was with Kyabje Dungse Chinyanova Rinpoche. And Anyway, at this point I'd been for many years with my gurus, Kimmo Dazu Rinpoche and Kimmo Chugi Rinpoche, who are both Kampa lamas, who are very kind of straightforward in terms of their conduct and don't really go in for kind of, you could say like many external acts of like flowery shows of respect. They're all very straightforward. So I had this kind of conditioning. And then Then I went to see Kyabje Dongse Chinobu Rinpoche, and everyone was lining up to greet him, and expressing their respect physically by bowing down and being very gentle and so on. And I was trying to show my respect, but it just didn't come off well, I guess. So then Rinpoche scolded me and said, "You have no respect. Look at you. You have no respect." So he pointed at me and said, "You guys." So Rinpoche scolded me and some others saying, this is how you guys behave in this quite disrespectful way. You might have respect inside, but your physical behavior doesn't express that respect. You can see how Rinpoche is kind of showing these expressions on the throne. This is how people are in Kham in Eastern Tibet. People are a bit like that. Kind of their behavior is coarse, seems coarse from the outside, but inside they really do have deep respect and reverence. But their behavior is different, quite different from the behavior of those in central Tibet, where people's behavior is much more refined and gentle and expressive, and that is important. That is definitely important in following the teacher. So this is in connection with how to treat. It's connected with one of these 8 points: conducting oneself purely in the teacher's presence. So it's also important in a group context to behave accordingly, because even if you have faith within you but you don't express it appropriately, in a group context, then that might give other people in the group the idea that you don't have respect for the teacher, or that you're of a different mindset. So these are really important points, actually. Anyway, sometimes I just tell these, add in these stories and anecdotes to kind of wake people up and freshen everyone up a little bit. So one of the points here that we'll go through in terms of how to follow a teacher is conducting oneself purely in the teacher's presence. So this concerns the way that we conduct ourselves physically, the way we comport ourselves. Then we have particular points on serving the teacher with one's body and speech, getting rid of pride, and not asserting one's own independence. So when in the presence of the teacher, then one must not assert one's own independence. This means one should consult one's teacher before engaging in, say, ritual and dharma activities oneself, like fire pujas, rituals for others, and so on. This will be explained more later on. If you are far away from your teacher in a different location, then you can assess the situation yourself and make your own decision. But if you're in the very presence of your teacher or very nearby your teacher, and you perform your own kind of activities as a lama in the presence of your own lama, that is inappropriate. So we come to an explanation of the first of these, making offerings. It's important to follow your teachers by offering them all the things that are extremely difficult for you to give your own child, spouse, body, and wealth. Think of the great practitioners and bodhisattvas of the past, like King Chuson Detsen, the great Dharma king of Tibet, who offered his own wife, Kandri Shitsogel, as well as his children, and all his wealth and kingdom to Guru Rinpoche, Pamasamava. There are so many examples in the past of practitioners, kings, and so on, offering their most cherished objects including their loved ones, to their teachers. Why? Because of bodhicitta, out of their devotion and commitment to attaining enlightenment for the benefit of others. These days, you don't really hear about or see people being able to do this. If constantly following the Master with whom you have a sacred commitment means giving things impossible to give, what need to mention giving your wealth and possessions? With utmost devotion, 3 times a day, offer mandalas of flowers to on your hands, and so on. 3 times a day, offer a mandala made of heaps of flowers if you have one ready, or failing that, if you don't have a mandala to hand, if you don't have something physical to offer. When we talk of mandala, we will explain the mandala in detail in the coming days when we get to the mandala offering. We'll talk about the outer inner secret mandala offering. The outer mandala offering is, for instance, the 37-fold mandala offering of the offering the entire universe and environment and everything in it. The inner mandala is offering one's own physical body, aggregates, elements, constituents. And the secret mandala, we also have the secret mandala. Offer all of these to the teacher. Prostrate 3 times. So when receiving teachings from the teacher, offer 3 prostrations at the outset. Likewise, even if you're not receiving teachings, if you see the teacher in the morning, offer 3 prostrations in greeting to them, and likewise in the evening, offer 3 prostrations when saying good night. When we talk about making offerings to the teacher, we're not talking necessarily about making offerings of gold and silver and brocades and so on. Actually, it's important to offer that which you cherish most, that which is most precious and valuable to you. Offer that to the teacher. Or offer something that you know that the teacher likes. So offer the things that are most valuable to you, and or offer the things that you know please the teacher. And that'll differ, right, depending on the teacher. So it's not always the case that, when making offerings to the teacher, the best thing to offer is gold. That's not the case. Of course, for a genuine teacher, there's no special value to gold at all. For a realized teacher, gold and soil are no different. In other words, if you do not offer things that please the teacher, or if you decide to make an offering and then do not do so, you will definitely be reborn as a hungry spirit and in the hells. So, as it says here, if you do not offer things that please the teacher. When we say the teacher, we're talking about the teacher from whom one receives teachings. It's important to make offerings to one's teacher, right? Not just any teacher, anyone who's wearing robes and is a teacher, but the teachers from whom one receives teachings. One should offer things to them, things that please them. One should offer whatever one can, in accord with one's ability. Disciples should therefore make suitable offerings to their teachers, and the teachers, for their part, should be sure to accept the offerings in order to counter the disciples' craving. As we see in Omniscient Jigme Rinpoche's life story. We can see that Jigme Rinpoche received whatever was offered to him. Why? In order to allow those people to gather merit, to perfect the accumulation of merit. So even if he had no need for what they were offering, he nevertheless accepted it for their sake, whether it be wealth or whatever offerings. So we can see with Jigme Lingpa, omniscient Jigme Lingpa, he would receive whatever offerings were made to him, he would accept them for the offerer's sake so they could accumulate merit. And he wouldn't reciprocate. It wasn't like he would receive their offering and then give them a gift in thanks, like the way people might give a gift to sponsors in thanks. So likewise with masters like Longchenpa, they just receive whatever is offered to them. Wealth, material possessions, they would just receive those offerings and they wouldn't respond by saying thank you or reciprocating. Likewise, if someone extremely poor offered something, say like a very lousy piece of food that most of us wouldn't dare to eat, thinking it's too low quality, he would still accept it and actually eat it. Why? So that that person could accumulate merit, right, for their sake. So there was no pickiness, no discrimination. These masters just accept the offerings for the benefit of those offering. So as it says here, the teachers should be sure to accept the offerings in order to counter the disciples' craving. So similarly, we see stories about offerings in Jason Miller-Rupa's life story. When someone offers the teacher something that is dear with a mind free of exception, the teacher accepts it compassionately, and to counter the disciple's clinging, takes it with the intention to benefit him. When we make offerings to our teachers, the teachers from whom we have received empowerment, transmission and instruction, because we're offering to such special objects with whom we have such a sacred special connection, making an offering to them, however big or small, can generate enormous merit, enormous benefit. So thereby we can complete the accumulations of merit and wisdom, these two accumulations. Now on page 32, the Tantra of Supreme Wisdom states, greater by far than offerings made to all the Buddhas in a kalpa is the massive merit that comes when one anoints a single hair of the teacher's paws with just one drop of oil. So greater than making offerings to all of the Buddhas in an eon. Just making an offering of one drop of oil to the paws of one's own guru creates even greater merit. So, this is to say that when it says a single hair of the teacher's paws here, the kind of teacher being referenced here are qualified teachers, like some of the teachers I had the great good fortune to meet and receive teachings from. Kyabje Dujun Rinpoche, the late Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, His Holiness Penno Rinpoche, Dongse Chinanova Rinpoche. Rinpoche mentioned several lamas' names. these sorts of great, genuine teachers, if we make offerings to them, then the merit accrued would be vast, just like explained in this verse. These days, I wonder if there are really teachers as precious, as sacred as that around. Maybe that's just my lack of pure perception, but so regarding one's teachers as Buddhas, the Diamond Masters are Vajradhara in person. The Vajra Masters are the Buddha in person. They embody all three jewels as taught in the Tantras. So you must follow them knowing that they are so without any doubt or hesitation. So, in this quotation from the Glorious Tantra of the Gathering of Secrets, it says, should you ask why, it's because the Master is the same as the enlightened mind and inseparable from it. Regard the Master as the adamantine or Vajra enlightened mind of all the Sugatas and Bodhisattvas. Vajra, or adamantine as it's translated here, it's also sometimes translated here as diamond, has the connotation of invincible, indestructible, unobstructed, unimpeded, indefeatable, and so on. These 7 layers of meaning as explained in Ngondro and other texts. And this is the nature of the bodhicitta, the enlightened mind of the Guru. The bodhicitta, the adamantine enlightened mind or bodhicitta of the Guru, is the same as the enlightened mind. Sorry, the Master is the same as the adamantine enlightened mind of the Sugatas and Bodhisattvas and inseparable from it. But when we talk about enlightened mind or bodhicitta here, we're not talking just about the wish to establish beings in enlightenment, that conceptual motivation, but actually ultimate bodhicitta, the self-arisen awareness, primordial wisdom. Innate primordial wisdom, that's what we're talking about here. From the adamantine absolute body or Dhammakaya, there arises the body of perfect enjoyment, the Sambhogakaya. And these present as form, manifest as form, the Namanakaya. So this line of prose aligns perfectly with some lines from the praising the names of Manjushri Tantra. However, beings are unable to see this, so as long as this is so, the teacher continues to appear in the ordinary form that beings can perceive, and in that way works for the benefit of beings. So disciples with constant devotion in body, speech and mind to their teachers, how do they see their teacher? They see the teachers as the same as all the Buddhas, that they are always Vajradhara. Vajradhara refers to the Dhammakaya. Vajradhara means to be endowed with Vajra, endowed with the adamantine. So Buddha Vajradhara doesn't just refer to the Sambhogakaya Buddha who is blue in color and wearing jewel ornaments and so on. That is the symbolic Vajradhara, but the real ultimate Vajradhara is the Dhammakaya. We need to understand that. Do not think about the Master and Vajradhara regarding them as distinct entities. Don't think that your teacher and Vajradhara are different, that Vajradhara is somehow something greater, one's teacher is something lesser. If you have that mindset, thinking that your teacher is separate from Vajradhara or lesser than Vajradhara, the Dhammakaya, then it will take forever for you to attain accomplishment. It will take forever for the siddhis to come about. You should therefore view your teachers as the embodiment of all the Buddhas, their eyes, limbs, and so forth. Their eyes, ears, and other faculties as the close sons, meaning the bodhisattvas, Kshitigarbha, and so on. The hairs on their bodies as arhats. Their limbs as the male and female wrathful deities. Their aggregates and elements as the male and female sugatas. So the gurus are the nature of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in this way. Not just the gurus, but ourselves. We too are the nature of the enlightened ones. So as their thrones, as the Guru perceive their thrones as the guardians of the world. We talk of lion thrones and other types of throne. Elephant throne, horse throne, peacock throne, and so on. And these are not just cultural or random. There are profound reasons for these. These are actually rooted in the tantras. If you look at the Guyagaba Tantra and other tantras, you will find the origin for these details. The lion throne, elephant throne, and so on, what they represent, what they are expressions of. Then we have a quotation from the Daimandaka. Their bodies are by nature the totality of Buddhas, their limbs are bodhisattvas, and so on. The worldly gods are their throne, their rays of light are the Lord of secrets. With these and other qualities should those who practice always view their form, the form of the Guru. For this reason, simply stepping on their shadow, the shadow of one's root guru, has negative consequences as serious as demolishing a stupa. So again, when we say shadow, their shadow here, we're not talking about the shadow of every teacher, just any teacher, but rather one's root teacher. That said, these days things are quite back to front, and often we find, for instance, here in various places in Nepal and especially in India, we find people really failing to show respect and reverence for the monastic sangha, for those wearing Buddhist robes and representing the teachings. You find lay people, lay women sitting, just having the presumption to sit ahead or above the monastic sanghas, even fully ordained monastics, and so on, and really not showing the monastic sangha any special respect or veneration. In Tibet, things are very different. There's still a strong tradition of respect and pure perception to those wearing robes and representing the teachings in that way, to the monks and nuns. Unfortunately, things are much more degenerate, especially in India, in many places. It's really important that as followers of Buddha we show respect to the monastic sangha, especially the monastic sangha. And up in Humla and Dolpo and many Himalayan regions, they still have a lot of respect and veneration, naturally show respect and veneration for the monastic sangha. I observe this myself here in this tent and in other occasions. So that is wonderful. On the other hand, to fail to show respect or even show disrespect is very degenerate and not good at all. So showing respect to the monastic sangha and teachers is one way of enacting and practicing the Dharma, right? So what we're doing here is receiving the teachings, and the point of receiving the teachings is to apply them ourselves, right? To put them into practice. To put them into practice ourselves, step by step, train our minds in the teachings. That is so important, to not have to wait for a teacher to point out our faults to us. Better if we can, from now onwards, actually apply the teachings bit by bit, right? We do that in the ways I just mentioned, in those and other ways. Stepping over their belongings, their shoes, seat and so on is just as bad, so always be careful to avoid such things. So for instance, the teacher's horse, a student should not ride. A teacher's seat, the student should not sit in or step over. One time Khenpo Daza Rinpoche was eating tukpa or some soup or something from his bowl, and then he gave me his bowl and said, "Now you have some." So I poured some of the tukpa out of his bowl into my bowl, and Khenpo Daza Rinpoche said, "No, just drink it from my bowl." But I didn't do that. I poured it into my bowl and drank it from my bowl, because it is not appropriate, it's not correct to drink from our teacher's bowl, to use our teacher's bowl in possessions. It says that right here, right? For fear of the negative consequences equivalent to those of destroying a stupa. Destroying a stupa is one of the 5 grave karmic misdeeds with immediate consequences. It is an incredibly grave negative deed. So for fear of such consequences, never tread on even the Guru's shadow, let alone their shoes, their seat, or their mount. The fool who steps upon the teacher's umbrella, shadow, and so on will fall from the human state onto razors. If you sit on the teacher's seat, walk over their shoes, and so on, that is the consequence. Therefore, if it should happen that you cannot avoid doing so, you should visualize yourself using diamond power to glide unobstructedly underneath the object and recite Om Vajrabhega Trama Hom. You should recite that mantra. If you, in some circumstances, have no choice but to step on or over the teacher's shadow or shoes and so on, then if you recite this mantra, you will avoid negative consequences. And the most important thing is to maintain the view, to meditate on the great indivisibility of purity and equality. If you can maintain that view of great purity and equality, then you will be sure to avoid negative consequences. So the reason the negative consequences of stepping on the Guru's shadow and so on is so grave is because the Guru is such a powerful object. When we talk about a powerful object, we're talking about an object such as an object with whom the potential positive and negative consequences are very, 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 very huge. Like with a teacher, if we serve our teacher well, if we put their teachings into practice, fulfill their commands, then the positive consequences of doing that are unsurpassable, really. Accomplishing the supreme siddhis, accomplishing liberation. But equally, the negative consequences of disrespecting the Guru are very, very grave. Why is an act so? To this end, the text says, why is such an act so serious? Because the object is so special, or we could say so powerful. So then we come to the third subsection here, carrying out one teacher's instruction. It's important to carry out everything your teacher asks joyfully and respectfully. So the teacher, a genuine teacher, will only instruct you to practice the Dharma, to act in accord with the Dharma. They're not going to tell you to do business or to do some negative actions. It's certainly very unlikely that a teacher would encourage their student to do anything that goes against the Dharma. So, in any case, these teachings on carrying out one's teacher's instructions and doing whatever the teacher says, it's a bit touchy these days with this modern notion of human rights and independence. In America, there's an anecdote I heard from someone about how a teacher was scolding one of their students, and another student stood up and said, "Hey, you can't do that to us here. This is America. I'm going to call the police and report you." Really makes me wonder, do we think the great perfection can be practiced in countries like America these days when people have that kind of modern mentality? It's maybe not good to speak so blatantly, so forthrightly about this, but these days a lot of Westerners with modern mentality, and just young people in general with this modern mentality, this idea of independence and this idea of independence, it's really it makes them unfit for the Dharma in many ways. It's like in a way it makes them unfit for the Dharma, unsuitable for the Dharma. It's can be quite problematic. In any case, when following the teacher, if we're following the teacher, it's important to carry out everything your teacher asks joyfully. If you cannot do something they ask you, then properly ask to be excused in a way that does not displease the teacher. So if the teacher tells you to do something that you feel you can't for some reason, then instead of just saying, "I can't do it," just answering back straight away and saying, "No, I can't do that, I'm not doing that," then you should explain, and you should explain your reasons and gently, respectfully excuse yourself. I just said some things about Westerners and modern people, but actually at the same time, there are some Western students who are so devoted and such excellent students that I don't think there are any Tibetans or few Tibetans who could live up to their example. Like, think of Dongse Chininobu Rinpoche's consort Pat, or like the way that Dongse Chininobu Rinpoche's consort and student Pat served him, the devotion and practice that she has. Difficult to find anyone on equal par with her. She's almost like a Khandri Yechit Sogil, I think Rinpoche said. And also think of Gelong Matthew Ricard, the way he served the late Khyalchi Dogu Khyentse Rinpoche. But these are rare exceptions. There are a few rare gems amongst the Western modern students, but 90% are not like that. So I say these things, some of the international students here might not be pleased to hear these things, might be annoyed, but anyway, that's how I feel it is. So, as we see in the teaching here, there is a way to follow the teacher that involves carrying out everything your teacher asks joyfully, respectfully, and so on. Also honoring the teacher and avoiding criticizing them and feeling critical of them, honoring one's connection with them once one has formed a connection by receiving the teachings. That is the way to follow the Dharma, the way to follow a teacher. But it's definitely not in line with a lot of people's modern mentality and this idea of human rights and individual rights, like these stories you hear about a lama scolding a student in the West and then being threatened by a student saying, "Hey, teacher, this isn't Tibet, this is America. You can't do that to us here. If you're not careful, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to report you." This is in complete discord with the teachings. Just complete discord, no discussion. Sometimes when I was younger, I would see my own teachers, scolding students or even beating students in public, in like a group setting. And I would think, do they really have to do it like that? Couldn't they just give the scolding more quietly or give the scolding in private? But now that I'm older and in that position myself, then I see that there's actually a real function to kind of a purpose to giving scoldings in public, because it really makes the point, right? And Rinpoche is adding in, telling some funny stories and anecdotes. So there's actually a real purpose and benefit to giving these kinds of public scoldings and harsh scoldings. But in the West, if a teacher acts like that, does this very same thing, a minute later you'll hear the siren of a police car coming to arrest the teacher. So how it's going to work, I don't know. If one does as they have said, even if it is something wrong, it will lead to ultimate good. Why then question doing it? So, for instance, Tilopa sent his student Naropa to steal. He sent him off to steal something, and then he got caught and beaten up. One time he sent Naropa off to steal some soup. And he stole the soup, offered it to Tilopa. And Tilopa really enjoyed the soup. "Oh, that was delicious soup," he said. And Naropa thought, "Oh, my guru really enjoyed that soup. I'll try and steal some more." So he went off to steal some more. He thought no one was around. Took another bowl of soup, but then some people spotted him and they grabbed him and beat him to a pulp. So we see actually instances of this basically in the life stories of the previous teachers. All of these things are done for the sake of the practitioner, to lead them to direct realization of the ultimate meaning, as Naropa eventually was led by Tilopa and so on.
Darbrejinan samchur dukbe medam memen so barje delle gerve tombra wasarwan deso jambe yang tuje gongje yishe tuke dage nyingla nyurdo jene chinge lavje joden ngodro so do nebe joden dre meje gebe myan meta ba jo traje gesene no zo